My baby shower was supposed to be the happiest day of my pregnancy. Pink decorations, laughing friends, celebration everywhere. But when my husband's mistress smiled at me from across the pool deck, I knew something terrible was about to happen. I just never imagined she'd try to kill us both. What you're about to hear will shock you to your core. A day meant for celebrating new life turned into a fight for survival. Let me tell you about my baby shower from hell, and how the worst day of my life led to the greatest blessing I could never have imagined. It started as such a perfect morning. I remember standing in front of my bedroom mirror at 8 months pregnant, smoothing down my flowing pink maternity dress. My hands instinctively went to my belly, where my little girl was doing her morning gymnastics routine. "Today's your big day, sweetheart," I whispered to her. "Everyone's coming to celebrate you." Carlos had spared no expense for this baby shower. Our backyard had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Pink and gold balloons swayed gently in the breeze, and the pool area sparkled with floating flowers and twinkling fairy lights strung between the palm trees. 50 of our closest friends and family were expected, and I felt like the luckiest woman alive. After 3 years of trying to get pregnant, this day felt like a miracle finally being celebrated. The morning flew by in a blur of hugs, gifts, and laughter. My mother cried happy tears as she arranged the pink roses in crystal vases. My best friend Maya kept taking photos of everything, determined to capture every moment. Carlos moved through the crowd like the perfect host he'd always been, making sure everyone had champagne while bringing me sparkling cider in a champagne flute so I wouldn't feel left out. Everything was exactly as I dreamed it would be. That is, until I noticed her. She was standing by the gift table, and I knew immediately that she didn't belong. While all the other women wore pastels and florals, she stood out in a striking red dress that hugged every curve of her model-thin figure. Her long dark hair fell in perfect waves, and she moved with the kind of confidence that made every man in the vicinity take notice, including my husband. I watched Carlos's face change the moment he spotted her. His easy smile faltered for just a second before transforming into something I'd never seen before. It was the look a man gives a woman he desires, not the polite expression of a host greeting a guest. My stomach tightened with more than just pregnancy discomfort. Determined to be the gracious hostess, I made my way over to her. "Hi there," I said, extending my hand with my warmest smile. "I don't think we've met. Are you here with someone?" She turned to face me, and her smile was dazzling. Too dazzling. "Oh, you must be Jenny," she said, clasping my hand with both of hers. "I'm Rachel." "Carlos and I work together. I hope you don't mind that I crashed your beautiful party." Something about the way she said Carlos's name made my skin crawl, but I pushed the feeling away. "Pregnancy hormones," I told myself. "Of course not," I replied. "Any colleague of Carlos's is welcome. What do you do?" "Oh, we're very close," she said, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite identify. "I'm his special assistant. I help him with all sorts of personal matters." The way she emphasized personal sent warning bells screaming in my head, but before I could process it fully, Maya appeared at my side. "Jenny!" "Time for the gift opening ceremony," she announced, but I caught the way her eyes narrowed at Rachel. Maya had always been protective of me, and her instincts were usually spot on. The next hour passed in a strange haze. I sat in my decorated chair, opening present after present, but I couldn't shake my awareness of Rachel. She seemed to know exactly where everything was in my house. When someone asked for the bathroom, she gave directions before I could. When Carlos's mother mentioned redecorating the nursery, Rachel commented on how cozy it was, as if she'd seen it herself, but the moment that made my blood run cold was when I opened her gift. Inside an expensive designer box was the most beautiful baby bag I'd ever seen, soft leather in pale pink with gold hardware that probably cost more than my car payment. The card attached simply read, "For the future." -R, quote. "It's gorgeous," quote, I managed to say, but Maya's sharp intake of breath beside me confirmed that she'd noticed what I had. This wasn't the kind of gift a casual work colleague gives. This was intimate, personal, expensive. This was the kind of gift a woman gives when she's trying to insert herself into your life. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself watching Carlos and Rachel more closely. They didn't interact much in front of everyone else, but I caught the meaningful glances, the way he'd subtly touch her back when passing behind her chair, the way she'd laugh a little too long at his jokes. My heart began to pound with a terrible certainty that I wasn't ready to face. When the party moved into its more relaxed phase, with guests mingling around the pool and Carlos firing up the barbecue, I excused myself to go inside and rest. The baby had been unusually quiet, which my doctor said was normal this late in pregnancy, but it always made me nervous. I needed a few minutes in the cool, quiet house to collect myself and try to make sense of what I was feeling. That's when I heard Carlos's voice coming from his study. The door was slightly ajar, and he was talking on the phone in the low, urgent tone he used for important business calls. But as I got closer, I realized this wasn't about business at all. "Rachel, we discussed this," he was saying. "Not here, not today. There are too many people around." My heart stopped. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear more. "I know this is hard," he continued, "but we have to be patient just a little longer. After the baby comes, we'll figure everything out. I promise you, this won't go on much longer." The words hit me like physical blows. I stumbled away from the door, my hands clutching my belly as if I could protect my daughter from the betrayal that was unfolding around us. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? I made it to the guest bathroom before the tears started falling. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw exactly what Carlos must see. A woman swollen with pregnancy, tired, emotional, probably not the exciting companion I'd been when we first met. But we were supposed to be a team. We were supposed to be building a family together. The bathroom door opened behind me, and I quickly wiped my eyes, expecting Maya or one of my other friends. Instead, Rachel stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Oh," I said, turning to face her. "Sorry, I was just finishing up." But Rachel made no move to let me pass. Instead, she leaned against the door, blocking my exit, and her sweet smile disappeared completely. "Actually, Jenny, I think we need to talk." The woman standing before me now was nothing like the charming guest who'd been working the party all afternoon. This Rachel was cold, calculating, and looking at me like I was an obstacle to be removed. "I know you heard Carlos on the phone," she said, examining her perfect manicure. "Poor thing, you look like you've seen a ghost." "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. Rachel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Please, did you really think Carlos would stay with you forever? Look at yourself, Jenny. You're huge, you're tired all the time, and let's be honest, you were never really in his league to begin with." Each word was carefully chosen to wound, and they found their mark. "Carlos loves me," I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. "Carlos loves what you represented," Rachel corrected. "Stability, respectability, the perfect wife for his image. But men like Carlos need passion, excitement, adventure. They need a woman who challenges them." "Are you sleeping with my husband?" I asked directly, surprised by my own boldness. Rachel's smile widened. "For over a year now, since long before you got pregnant actually. I told him I was pregnant too, to speed things along. But honestly?" She laughed again. "I can't stand children. Messy, loud, demanding little things. I'm not even pregnant, but he doesn't need to know that yet." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. "You're lying to him?" "I'm managing him," she said smoothly. "Carlos thinks he's getting a fresh start with me and our imaginary baby after he dumps you and your screaming brat. But what he's really getting is a wife who will spend his money, look good on his arm, and never burden him with the reality of family life." I stared at her in horror. "He deserves to know the truth." "He'll never believe you over me," Rachel said confidently. "I've spent months making myself indispensable to him. I know exactly what he needs, what he wants, what makes him feel like the powerful man he thinks he is." You, on the other hand, represent everything that ties him down. I tried to push past her to the door, but she grabbed my arm. We're not finished talking. Let go of me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. People will be looking for me. They're all too busy drinking Carlos's expensive champagne and admiring his beautiful house, Rachel replied. No one's going to miss the boring pregnant woman for a few more minutes. Something in her tone made me realize that this conversation was about to become much more dangerous. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to understand your situation, Rachel said, her grip on my arm tightening. Your marriage is over. Carlos is just waiting until after you give birth to make it official. He doesn't want to look like the bad guy who left his pregnant wife, but the moment that baby comes out, you're yesterday's news. You're wrong, I said, but my voice was shaking now. Carlos would never abandon his child. Rachel's laugh was genuinely amused this time. Oh, honey. He'll pay child support, maybe even take the kid for weekends when it's convenient. But you think he wants to deal with diapers and crying and sleepless nights? That's what nannies are for. He'll get his perfect life with me, and you'll get to be a struggling single mother with a nice monthly check. The picture she painted was so vivid, so possible, that I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to hear it from me first, Rachel said. I want you to know that I won. That everything you thought you had was really mine all along. Carlos's attention, his desire, his future. I took it all, and there's nothing you can do about it. I finally managed to wrench my arm free and open the bathroom door. You're insane, I said, stepping into the hallway. But Rachel followed me. Am I? Or am I just honest about what men really want? I walked quickly toward the back door, desperate to get back to the safety of the party, back to people who cared about me. But Rachel's voice followed me. Running back to your little celebration? She called. Enjoy it while it lasts, Jenny. It's the last party anyone's throwing for you. I stepped outside onto the pool deck, hoping the fresh air would help me breathe again. Most of the guests were gathered around the barbecue area or sitting at the tables Carlos had set up under the pergola. The music was still playing, people were still laughing, and for a moment I could pretend that the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. But Rachel wasn't done with me. She followed me outside and cornered me near the deep end of the pool, far enough from the main party that no one would overhear us, but close enough that anyone looking over would just see two women having a conversation. You know what the funny thing is? Rachel said, moving closer to me. Carlos finds you physically disgusting now. He told me that watching your body change has been revolting for him. He can barely stand to touch you. Stop, I said, backing toward the pool edge. Just stop. He said your neediness is suffocating him, she continued relentlessly. All your questions about the nursery, your excitement about baby names, your constant need for reassurance. He said it makes him feel trapped. You're lying, I said, but tears were streaming down my face now. Am I? When's the last time he made love to you, Jenny? Really made love to you, not just went through the motions because he felt obligated? I couldn't answer because she was right. It had been months since Carlos had touched me with any real desire, and I'd told myself it was normal, that men sometimes struggled with their pregnant wives changing bodies. But hearing it confirmed, hearing that he'd discussed it with her, was devastating. I thought so, Rachel said, seeing my expression. He comes to me for everything you can't give him anymore. Passion, excitement, the feeling that he's desired rather than needed. Why are you doing this? I asked desperately. What did I ever do to you? You exist, Rachel said simply. You're in my way. Carlos will never fully commit to me as long as you and that baby represent his obligations to the past. I need you gone. Something in the way she said gone made me take another step backward, and I felt my heel hit the pool's edge. Rachel, I think you should leave. Oh, I don't think so, she said, and suddenly she was right in front of me, her hands on my shoulders. I think you should leave. Before I could react, before I could scream or fight back or call for help, Rachel shoved me hard with both hands. I felt myself falling backward, felt the moment when there was nothing but air beneath my feet, and then the cold water hit me like a wall. The shock of it drove all the air from my lungs. My heavy maternity dress immediately began dragging me down, the fabric wrapping around my legs like chains. I tried to kick toward the surface, but I'd never been a strong swimmer, and 8 months pregnant, I was helpless against the weight pulling me under. Panic set in as I realized I was drowning. Above me, I could see the distorted shape of Rachel standing at the pool's edge, but she wasn't calling for help. She was just watching, waiting. My baby. The thought crashed through my terror like lightning. My baby who had been so quiet today, who depended on me for everything, who would die with me if I couldn't get to the surface. I fought harder, clawing at the water, but my movements were clumsy and desperate, burning oxygen I didn't have. The pool lights blurred above me as my vision started to fade. This couldn't be how it ended, not like this. Not when we were so close to meeting each other, my daughter and I. Not because of one evil woman's jealousy. Just as darkness began to creep in from the edges of my vision, strong arms wrapped around me from behind. Someone else was in the water, someone who moved with the confidence of an expert swimmer. He pulled me upward with powerful strokes, and suddenly we broke the surface. I gasped and choked, water streaming from my nose and mouth, but I was breathing. We were breathing, my baby and I. The man holding me swam us quickly to the pool's edge where other hands reached down to pull me out. "Call 911!" the man shouted as he lifted me onto the pool deck. "She needs medical attention immediately." I found myself lying on the warm concrete, coughing up pool water while concerned voices buzzed around me. Someone had thrown a towel over me, and gentle hands were checking my pulse, asking if I could hear them. But all I could focus on was the flutter of movement in my belly. My baby was okay. We were both okay. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" The voice belonged to a paramedic who had somehow materialized beside me. "Jenny," I managed. 8 months pregnant. "We're going to take excellent care of you both," he assured me, already checking my blood pressure. "Can you tell me what happened?" I looked around for Rachel, but she was nowhere to be seen. Carlos was there, looking pale and shaken, but his eyes held more annoyance than concern. "She fell in," he said before I could speak. "It was an accident." But my rescuer, who was now sitting beside me in his soaked, expensive suit, shook his head. "I saw the whole thing," he said calmly. "The woman in red pushed her deliberately." Carlos's face went white. "That's impossible. Rachel would never—" "Rachel?" I sat up despite the paramedic's protests. "Where is she?" "She left," Maya said, appearing at my side with tears in her eyes. "Right after you fell in, said she had an emergency." The paramedic was loading me onto a stretcher now, but I reached out to grab the hand of the man who'd saved us. "Thank you," I whispered. "You saved my baby." He squeezed my fingers gently. "I'm Daniel," he said, "and I'm going to make sure you both stay safe." The next few hours were a blur of hospital tests and monitoring. The doctors assured me that the baby was fine, her heartbeat strong and regular, but they wanted to keep me overnight for observation. Carlos visited once, staying just long enough to awkwardly pat my hand and mumble something about dealing with the insurance company about the party. But Daniel came back. He arrived that evening with flowers and a genuine concern that made my chest tight with unexpected emotion. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into the chair beside my hospital bed. "Confused," I admitted. "I keep trying to make sense of what happened." Daniel was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "Would it help to know that the pool area has security cameras?" My heart stopped. "What did they show?" "Exactly what I saw," he said. "Rachel pushed you deliberately. The police have the footage and they're looking for her now." "Carlos doesn't believe it," I said quietly. "Carlos doesn't want to believe it," Daniel corrected. "There's a difference." Over the next few days, as the investigation unfolded, the full scope of Rachel's deception came to light. She wasn't just Carlos's mistress. She was a con artist with a history of targeting wealthy married men. The pregnancy she'd claimed was completely fabricated, part of an elaborate scheme to manipulate Carlos into leaving me so she could access his money. When the police finally arrested her, she confessed everything with the same casual cruelty she'd shown me by the pool. She'd planned to disappear with as much of Carlos's assets as she could steal once their fake marriage was secure. The baby shower had been her opportunity to eliminate the one person who might expose her lies: me. Carlos was devastated when he learned the truth. He begged for my forgiveness, claimed he'd been manipulated and seduced, swore it would never happen again. But the damage was done. I'd seen who he really was when he thought I might die, more concerned with his reputation than my life. A marriage couldn't survive that kind of betrayal. The divorce was swift and fair. Carlos, perhaps motivated by guilt or maybe just eager to put the scandal behind him, didn't fight me on custody or support. But more importantly, he didn't fight me when I told him I was moving on with my life, because Daniel had become more than just my rescuer. During the weeks of recovery and legal proceedings, he'd been a constant source of strength and kindness. He brought me books when I was on bed rest, listened when I needed to process my feelings about the betrayal, and slowly, carefully, helped me see that not all men were like Carlos. When my daughter Sophia was born 2 months later, Daniel was there. Not in the delivery room, we weren't ready for that yet, but in the waiting room with flowers and a teddy bear, ready to celebrate her arrival into the world. He held her with the tenderness of a man who understood how precious life could be. 1 year later, Daniel took me back to a pool. Not the one where I'd nearly died, but a beautiful infinity pool overlooking the ocean at a resort where we'd gone for a weekend getaway. Sophia was with my mother, and Daniel and I were finally ready to talk about our future together. "I know this might seem crazy," he said, taking my hands as we stood by the water's edge, "but that terrible day when I pulled you out of that pool was the luckiest day of my life, because it brought you to me." He dropped to one knee right there with the sunset painting the water gold and the sound of waves below us. The ring was perfect, the moment was perfect, and when he asked me to marry him, there was only one answer. "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Sometimes I think about that baby shower, about how what should have been the happiest day of my pregnancy turned into a nightmare. But then I look at my daughter, happy and healthy and loved beyond measure. I look at Daniel, who jumped into a pool in his best suit to save a stranger and ended up saving so much more than my life, and I realize that sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as our worst moments. Rachel was sentenced to 5 years in prison for attempted murder and fraud. Carlos's business eventually recovered from the scandal, though he lost several major clients, including Daniel's company. But more than that, he lost his chance at the family he claimed to want. As for me, I got the family I never dared dream of, a man who loves me completely, a daughter who brings joy to every day, and the knowledge that sometimes when your whole world falls apart, it's just making room for something beautiful to take its place. That's the thing about second chances. They often come when you least expect them, from the most unlikely sources, in the most impossible moments. And sometimes the person who saves your life ends up being the love of your life too. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that better days are coming. And remember, you're stronger than you think, and your greatest love story might be just around the corner, even if it doesn't look anything like what you planned.